'Tis I, your old pal King Chuck. I am on a roll as of late because even during the holiday season, back when I was doing Bee-otch of the day virtually every day, I decided to give the holidays off, and I would just devote, the last 2 weeks to getting Bee-otch of the year together and all that. But I kind of threw that system out because of changes in my life, and it's turned into a situation where it's like I'll do it when I see stupidity and it needs to be talked about. And what do you know, this week is no exception because of what happened yesterday on Christmas. And to put it quite nicely, the fine folks at the Minnesota Vikings gave the Detroit Lions a pink bunny pajama suit. Like in the Christmas Story. When little Ralphie got the pink bunny pajamas, and it was a pivotal moment in the movie, and I think it caused Ralphie to hate his aunt. My God. Anyway, so the rest of the story was that so coming into Christmas Day game, the Lions had to win those last two games. They had to win on Christmas Day and on January 4th when they play against Chicago. But a couple of other things had to happen, and one of them was that Green Bay had to lose both games. So, this is what happened. So Detroit played, how do I say this? They did not bring their A game. As a matter of fact, the Vikings, so this is what happened. People were like, well, the Vikings are on their third quarterback this year. They've been kind of a shitty team in their last place. Well, what do you know? The Lions got mauled big time. Jared Goff did not have much in the way of targets to throw at. It's like the defense of the Vikings beat the offense. Goff got sacked multiple times, like 6 times. There were some interceptions, there were some fumbles, and it was like it was amateur hour. So anyway, we all know the rest of the story. The Lions lost 24-10 and are not going to be in the playoffs this year. So the only good news that the Lions have are that they still have a chance of having a winning season, just no playoffs. Which is to me, it's like going from an A student to being a D student right then and there, maybe C-. Because that's what the Lions need to do. They need to win this game or else. But I'm not going to lie. A lot of people have already said that the Lions were already doomed as it was because the NFL decided to give them a tough season this year. They gave them a bunch of tough opponents, and the rest of the story was that the Lions, somebody did predict 9-8 on the season. And what do you know? They're right. They were right. And I think that's the situation. The Lions were going to lose anyway because that's exactly what the NFL wants. Hell, look at what happened last week when, it's like DK Metcalf. Look at what happened to him. He decided to punch slap a Lions fan in the stands. He was brought back into the game later. And the ref's excuse was that, oh, we didn't see nothing. Yeah, and I was really hoping that the Lions would beat the living shit out of Pittsburgh. Only, because, the thing is, folks, is that the Lions, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're a mediocre, they're a barely above average team too. And the sad truth is now, and not only that, the Steelers quarterback, he's that douchebag who decided to, he didn't, I don't want to do COVID shots. Oh, I don't need that. Yeah, Aaron Rodgers. Fuck him. Fucking Aaron Rodgers. And I was laughing my ass off because his time with the Jets were terrible. And now, not only that, he was also trying to become the next host of Jeopardy. Let's remember that. But thankfully, that never happened. So, here's the rest of this. So, anyway, back to what I was blabbing about. So, the Lions' last game of the season will be on January 4th, the Sunday after this, the New Year. And what will happen is they're going to go after the Bears. And they already beat the Bears once this season. And they got to win this game or else they're not going to have, if there is a plus to losing. They could get some good players for next year, some new kids from, some good draft, a somewhat decent draft pick. Maybe that's what's going on. I don't know. Sometimes team owners will tell, and it's true. They will tell coaches, you need to intentionally lose so we can get some draft picks and not have to pay them a huge salary. Because they're all cheapos, They're all cheapskates. So, but then you look at Chicago. The Chicago Bears, they have a brand new coach, and guess who it was? It was Dan Campbell's assistant from the last couple of years, his offensive assistant. So yeah, he's been kicking ass and taking a few names as a result. But here's what's funny. Chicago has had a long history of some pretty shitty team owners. And of course, you look at, right now, one example is the Chicago White Sox. And, their owner is crying that, well, we need a new stadium. Yeah, he's trying to actually move the team out of Chicago. And what's funny is that owner, he's also the owner of the Chicago Bulls, and he was the guy who owned the Bulls during their heyday with Jerry Reinsdorf. There we go. The sad truth is, Reinsdorf was a great owner when Michael Jordan was on the team. Today, not as much. So, yeah, it's like the team has suffered for the last couple of years and people don't like him. And then, of course, there were the Chicago Cubs, the other team in town. They were owned by the Tribune Company for years, only because and of course, there was, because they were competing against Ted Turner, and Ted Turner had the Atlanta Braves and TBS, and he made a lot of money off of all that. It was all, it was the Super Channel era, Superstation era. And guess what happened? The Tribune had to sell the Tribune went bankrupt, and they had to sell the Chicago Cubs. They actually sold it to this wealthy billionaire family, the Ricketts, and they've actually turned the team around. Not only that, they actually did, they actually did something scary. They, for the first time let's remember what happened in I think it was 2010 or so. First time in so long, they won the World Series. Hell froze over for them. And of course, let's not forget the Blackhawks hockey team. So here's the story. The Blackhawks were part of the original six, along with Detroit, Boston, New York, Montreal, and Toronto. And what happened was the founder of the Blackhawks, his name was William Laughlin. He died in 1946. And what happened was when Laughlin died, his family sold the team to a guy by the name of Bill Tobin. And then the NHL noticed that Tobin was trading off a lot of their best players over to Detroit. Well, they found out that Jim Norris, the owner of the Detroit Red Wings, was using him as a puppet. So the NHL went to the Norris family and said, okay, well, let's do this. The elder Norris can keep owning the Red Wings, but here's what would happen. The Blackhawks could be owned by the younger Jim Norris, but there was going to be no interaction between those two teams, period, end of story. And it turned out to be a good deal. So what happened was the Red Wings won their last Stanley Cup in 1955. And as for the Blackhawks, 1961. Well, by then, both Norrises had died. So what happened was when the younger Norris died, the one that owned the Blackhawks, so what happened was the minority owner of the Detroit Red Wings took over full-time ownership of the Blackhawks. And that man was Arthur Wirtz. Arthur Wirtz would eventually die in, I think it was 1983, and his son Bill took over the team. And Bill was a shitty human being of an owner. Bill was nicknamed Dollar Bill Wirtz because he did not want to spend any money on that team. The only thing he really did positively was move the team to a new arena in 1992, I believe. And it was the United Center, 91-92. And it was shared between the Bulls and his team, the Blackhawks. So Bill Wirtz had he was very strict. And one of the things that he did that pissed a lot of people off was that he blocked home games from being shown locally in Chicago. And he said it was to better, he felt it was unfair for ticket holders. And, he was not a big spender on players. He was, a lot of players ended up, like Chris Chelios, for an example. He became a Red Wing. Yeah, he was one of the better players that the Blackhawks had. And then he ended up, and it's like, what's funny is, in later years, he became more associated with the Red Wings. Yeah, I remembered he had a Chelios Chili's Chili in Detroit. Yeah, he did that for a while. I don't know if it's still there, but anyway, the rest of the story was that, so what happened was, so anyway, Bill Wirtz threatened to sue anybody who trashed him. And yeah, I guess somebody wrote a book about him. And yeah, and it's like when news broke that he was threatening to sue people, it was like even legendary players for the Blackhawks wanted nothing to do with Bill. And there was another hockey team in Chicago, the Wolves, and they actually had more sellouts than the Blackhawks did. It was plain and simple. People didn't like Bill Wirtz because he was an asshole. And guess what happened? He died. So when Bill Wirtz died, his son Rocky took over the team. And he realized that his dad was an asshole too. So guess what he did? He started ponying up more cash for players. He started making good deals with TV and radio stations, the networks, everything. And soon, guess what happened? The Blackhawks won the World Series. They won the Stanley Cup. First time since 61. It was in, I think it was 2010. Yeah, it was like 49 years they had to wait. And it was plain and simple. It was too fucking long that they had to wait. And then on top of that, but here's what happened. Then they kind of lost their mojo and in recent years. And sadly, Rocky Wirtz passed away. So now his son is running the team. And guess what? They suck again. And not only that, their head coach is Jeff Blashill. The first coach the Detroit Red Wings had, the first losing coach the Red Wings had, since their glory days of winning all these Stanley Cups in the 90s and 2000s. And of course, yes, we need to talk about the Bears. They've been owned by the Hollis family since day one. Papa Bear Hollis had the team first. Then he died. His daughter took over the team. And then, 3 years after, little Hollis, Virginia, took over the team, they won the Super Bowl. They won the Super Bowl 20, 1986. They, of course, we all remember the Super Bowl Shuffle. Oh my God, what a horrible song. And the point was, but it was all downhill from there. And it was like, they were an easy target for the Lions. They lost a ton of games. I mean, they won a ton of games against the Bears. But here's what happened. Jenny Hollis McCaskey died earlier this year. She was 102 years old. So now Jenny's son owns the team, George. So, and one of the first things that George McCaskey did since taking the team over from Mommy was, snatching Ben Johnson away from the Lions. And look at them now. Look at the Chicago Bears record versus the other team. So the Chicago Bears, they're the number one team in the, they're 11-4. Green Bay is, it says 9-5. It should be like 9-5-1. Minnesota and the Lions are tied for 8-8. So there's that part of me that says, well, good for that. And yeah, I feel good about the Bears. It's like, and I hope that the Lions can, clean up their wounds and do better next time. But here's the problem. For the Lions to go from worst to almost, from first to almost worst in a season. Like I said earlier, part of the blame goes on the NFL. Part of the blame goes on the officials. Part of the blame does indeed go on the fact that, Ben Johnson was bought out. And it really comes to show that he was the grit of the Lions and not necessarily 100% on Dan Campbell. And, there's always bear luck next year. But here's something to think about. And I know I've been doing this for 20 minutes now, and I haven't explained why I have not given Amon-Ra St. Brown the Bee-otch of the day. Well, one of the Lions' victories this year was against Washington. What happened was when the Lions beat Washington. Guess who attended that game back in November? That's right, number 47. Trump. So the story is, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is the wide receiver for the Lions, he does a touchdown dance similar to the dance that Donald Trump does, where he pretends that he's jacking off two guys at the same time. And he does that stupid dance. And of course, he did that. And when he did that, he pointed at Donald Trump's skybox at FedEx Field in Maryland. And so this is what happened. A few days later, he does a podcast called the St. Browns. He does this with his with his brother. I can't even pronounce his name. Yeah, so the story is that his father, his name is John Brown, and legally he put a saint in his son's names because there were too many Browns around, but no Saint Browns. So, and he decided to name his sons after Roman warriors. That's why Amon-Ra St. Brown is named like that. And his brother, and of course, his brother is, Ditto. No, Ditto is not his name. So the story was, there was some speculation that Amon-Ra St. Brown is a Trump supporter, although he is, he says, it doesn't talk much about his politics. He did say that he did apologize to anybody he offended, but it sounded like he is a big Trump supporter. And, his brother's name, by the way, let me try to pronounce it. Equanimous. Jesus Christ. Equanimous Tristan Imhotep John St. Brown. And then you got Amon-Ra Julian Hiru John St. Brown. Yeah, as a matter of fact, it says here on Wikipedia, St. Brown was born to mother Miriam, whose real last name is Steyer, who is originally from Leverkusen, Germany, and father John Brown, who was a bodybuilder in the 1980s and a two-time amateur Mr. Universe. And by the way, Equanimous is a free agent, so he ain't playing football right now. He played for the Bears and Packers. So, but Amon-Ra is still doing pretty good. Now, the sad truth is, one of the lessons I've learned about football, or any sport for that matter, is that if you put your tongue up the wrong asshole, you're going to pay for it. So here's the story. One name that pops up into my mind is, of course, Tim Tebow. Remember Tim Tebow? He was that phenom who, of course, he was a big college football guy. And then what happened was his career kind of went down the shitter. So Tim Tebow's story was that his mother, I guess, was doing a mission trip. Yeah, he was actually born in the Philippines. There we go. I got his Wikipedia page up. And anyway, what happened was, so the story was he appeared in this commercial for this right-wing organization that was, supporting right-wing bullshit. And, it says here that Tebow has appeared repeatedly at events in opposition to abortion, including the 2021 March for Life, where he was a featured speaker. And he has been described as a staunch pro-life activist, in which he attributes to his mother's decision to carry him. So the story was, his mother was like on this mission trip, and she was in danger because of having a miscarriage or dying. She continued to have the baby. And so what happened was, and the sad thing is, when he was a football player, he was this college football phenom, and then he was put into the Denver Broncos. He only lasted like one season. So, I am just like, and I remembered, his commercial was supposed to air during the Super Bowl. And they were like, this is too controversial. I'm like, no shit. So it says here, that he played for, he played for a couple of different teams, and he just wasn't a great player at all. Period. End of story. So another person that comes to my mind is, of course, Harrison Butker. Remember Harrison Butker? He was that kicker for the Chiefs. So, he's a place kicker for Kansas City. So Harrison Butker, a couple of years ago, made a very foolish decision by doing this thing at some Christian school, and while up on stage, he tells everybody that all you women out there should never have to work. You need to find a man who can work, who makes enough money so you can stay home and poop out babies. It's like, what the fuck are you thinking, man? You know something? And Harrison Butker is just, to me, one of those assholes who likes to not only look down on women, but look down on men who don't make enough money. So if they have a wife, they actually have to have a career to keep a roof over their fucking head. Folks, I don't have a wife, okay? My father, my 73-year-old elderly father, who has had 2 back surgeries this year, he lives with me. And, he only makes like $1,000 a month from Social Security. And the story with my father is that, sometimes, I have to support him, but sometimes his money has to support me too, because too many times he'll tell me to go, get out your card and pay for this. And I'm like, I'm not made out of money either. It's like I try to do a budget. I try to save money every month. And even sometimes he'll tell me I need to buy this and buy that. And yeah, it gets on my nerves. And, and I would imagine if I had a wife, same fucking situation. Even though my wife would probably make a lot more money. I mean, I do pretty good for myself. Of course, I also work a lot of overtime as well. But the reality is, people like Harrison Butker need to realize why women have to work. And it's because shit has changed over the years. And one of them is the fact that we are giving wealthy assholes like him, we are allowing him to pay less in taxes, so that way we, the American people, have to work harder. And for him to be so teched in the head about Christianity, it makes me proud I don't go to church on Sunday anymore. Period. End stop. And guess what happened to Harrison Butker? And guess what happened to his team? The Chiefs had been Super Bowl people for a long time. And this season, they're not going to be in there. No Super Bowl for the Chiefs. As a matter of fact, there's even, like the Lions, there's injuries galore. Including, of course, it just goes on and on. It's like the only good news with the Chiefs I can think of right now is the fact that, they're going to get a new stadium in a couple of years. Yeah. Yeah, they're actually moving to the state of Kansas. The state governor in Kansas just announced, they're going to build this brand new stadium in Kansas City. I think it's like over by Kansas City, Kansas. So there you go. But now we have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who decided to dedicate his little his little touchdown to Trump. And guess what happened? It's like people need to tell him how evil he is. And you know what happened? Look at what's happened to the Lions pretty much since that day. The Lions used to be a fun team to watch, and now it's like William Clay Ford. The evil spirit of him is back to attacking that whole fucking team and telling them, back in the game, baby. It's like I loved it for several years, when they wore these stupid, on their uniforms, the stupid emblem that it's still on their helmets too. WCF for William Clay Ford. And I keep thinking to myself, it stands for something else. We can't football. You know what it is? It's like when William Clay Ford owned the Lions, they only won one championship game, one playoff game, and he owned the team for like 50 years. And then he dies, his wife takes over the team, and she's a better owner than he is. And now their daughter, Sheila, owns the team. And, I think she's a decent owner. It's just that, we've had a tough year, but it's also karma that's hurting the team because one of their better players decided to kiss the wrong ass, and look at what happened. You understand? And I know he apologized. He now understands that Donald Trump is hurting a lot of people with his lunatic policies. And another thing, too, is that Amon-Ra is also on he's promoting some weird healthcare shit. So apparently, he's a part of some organization that's like a healthcare plan, but it's not. And it's a faith-based organization. Yeah, I don't know how it works. But apparently, and it's like, once again, I'll say it once and I'll say it again. We need universal health care in America. We're long overdue for it. But we don't have it because the wealthy have pushed too hard and too far to stop it. And sadly, it's not just a problem with the Republicans, but the Democrats too. And now, they're trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act by increasing tax subsidies. So that way it becomes unaffordable, and the Republican health care plan, which there is none, will become more and more into effect. But to people like Amon-Ra St. Brown, let's remember something. He is a fucking millionaire. If he, if he gets sick, he goes to the doctor, no biggie. He can afford it. If, he has a family member that gets sick, no problem. He can afford it. Because $100,000 to Amon-Ra St. Brown, here's the thing. To the average American citizen, $100,000, that's a lot of money. But to Amon-Ra St. Brown, no problem. But to the average American citizen, it's bankruptcy. And I've seen it happen. Watch the movie Sicko. There was a section in the film where it showed this middle-aged couple. The husband had several heart attacks, and they ended up losing everything, so they ended up having to live with their kids in a basement. But folks, that's the thing about Amon-Ra St. Brown. He, when he did that little Trump dance, it showed the world how fucked up he can be. And it let us down, and it let his team down. So and it's like, I hate it when sports teams play right-wing politics. Because once you become a multimillionaire, politics don't mean shit to you. But when you start abandoning your fans, like Kid Rock has, well, there you go. Anyway, all I can say is, there's always next year. Wounds will heal. And I'm hoping that next year, the Lions can roar again. Learn from the mistakes. Try to get, figure out what the fuck happened and fix it up. And that's all I have to say about that. So, will the Lions roar again? Well, that's up to the Ford family and Dan Campbell and the rest of the team. But, you also have to remember that Amon-Ra St. Brown is young, so hopefully he'll learn his lesson sooner or later. All right. I am King Chuck. Good day and good luck. Have a good weekend, everyone.